we can use this recursive formula to find the terms in our sequence. Okay, so right now this sequence I have 3 terms, 2, 4, and 8. And our goal is to find the next term. Okay, I know some of you can look at this real quick and be like, oh, I'm just multiplying by 2. So I'm just going to multiply by 2 to get the next term. That's all good. But what I want you to do today, or what I'm going to show you to do, is we are going to use the formula to find the next term. Okay? So let's get into this now. All right. So we're going to find this next term. And if you're really good at mental math, you know it has to be 16. Okay? Just because we're multiplying by 2 all the way. You found the pattern. But let's pretend we didn't know that, and we're going to use this formula to find it. Okay? So we have to know what these variables mean first. So the letter N in this case, it also could be exchanged with, it could be X, it could be T, it could be D, it could be any letters. Just think of it as your input. Okay? So the input we have here for our function, all right, our function B, we have an input of N. What does this input stand for? What does this variable stand for? It stands for the term. In the sequence. Okay? So when you see this sequence formula, oops. Okay, when you see this sequence formula, that letter N, or the input variable, just stands for the term in the sequence. All right, let me explain what that means. Okay, what this means is this. If you look at our sequence up here, the first number is 2. This is our first term. Okay, this is term 1. The second number in our sequence is our second term, or term 2, and so on. This would be term 3, and we are trying to find term 4. Okay? So what we want to do here is the number we want to plug in for N, because this is how we're going to use the formula. We've got to plug something in, is the term number we want. So we want the 4th term, which means I'm going to plug in 4 for N. So anywhere I see N, I'm plugging in 4, because we're looking for the 4th term. If we wanted the 5th term, we would plug in 5 here. If we wanted the 100th term, we would plug in 100. Okay? So N is just the number you're trying to find in the sequence, the term you're trying to find in the sequence. So let's go ahead and do that math. So we have B. Instead of N, we want the 4th term equal to the function B. Remember, B just stands for the function name. We again want the 4th term minus 1. I'm just plugging it in. And then we go times 2. Okay? We're going to ignore this part right now, and I'll show you how to use this later. But we're just focusing in on this part of the formula. Okay? Like I mentioned, don't get confused with the B. The B is just the name of the function. Okay? Sometimes that letter changes to F. Usually you'll see F. Alright, so now let's do this math. What this is saying is I'm using the B function, which is this sequence here, and I want to find the 4th term of it. To find the 4th term, I got to do this math. So let's do parentheses first. We have B, and 4 minus 1 is 3. And then we have multiplied by 2. Okay? So it's very important. This is pretty much the understanding of the recursive rule. This B parentheses 3 really means I want to look at my sequence and I want the 3rd term. So it's basically say, look at your sequence B. This is my sequence B. And I want you to replace this entire thing here with the third term in my sequence. So if you look, the third term in my sequence is 8. So this entire thing gets replaced by 8. Now we bring down the rest of the formula. Times 2. And we're still finding the fourth term. Okay? So if you can understand what just happened here, we basically need part of the sequence in order to find the next part of the sequence. So in other words, in order to find the fourth term, we had to know the third term, which in this case was 8. So now let's just do this math. 8 times 2. So the fourth term in my sequence is going to be 8 times 2, which is 16. I now can put 16 in here. Okay? And this is how you use the formula. The reason it's called the recursive rule, because you have to reuse the previous term. So in other words, if I want to find the third term, I would need to know the second term. If I want to find the second term, I better know the first term. That's how this formula works. If I want to find the 99th term, I need to first know the 98th term. Okay? So let's kind of do this again. We're going to pretend we didn't know the second term. Alright, so let's pretend, hey guys, we're going to try to find the second term. We all know it's 4, because I gave you that answer already. But let's pretend we didn't know it, and let's use this formula to figure it out. Okay? So let's try that. So we need to find the second term. So I'm plugging in 2 for n. So 2 for n, and then I'm going to plug in 2 for n here. So equals to the function b 2 minus 1 times 2. Okay? And now, if I do this math correctly, I should get the second term. So let's do it. 2 minus 1 is 1. Okay? So in order to find the second term, I need to know the first term. That's what this is saying. So if you look at our formula, don't even look at the sequence, but if you look at our formula, this is the reason you have to state your first term. Okay? This right here is saying my first term is 2. And we know that because it was in the sequence. But without this first term, I'm not able to find the second term. So it's very important when we write our formulas that you tell me or let everybody know, hey, you're going to need the first term. Here it is. It's number 2. Okay? So now that I know b parentheses 1 or b of 1, that's how you say that, b of 1 is equal to 2. So I'm just going to replace this whole thing with the number 2. Okay? Because we know it's our first term. Now we bring down the rest of the formula. We're going to multiply that by 2. And now we can figure out the second term. 2 times 2 is 4. So the second term in my sequence that's labeled B is 4. And we already knew that, but I just wanted to show you why it's important to always write down your first term when you're writing the recursive formula. Okay? And again, we're going to practice writing this again. We'll do an example of how this works. I just want to show you how the formula actually works. Okay? All right. So again, just to summarize, here's the recursive formula. The way it works is whatever number you want to find, whatever term you want to find, you plug it into the variable. But in order to find that term, you got to know the term before it. So in order to find the fourth term, I had to know the third term, and so on. Okay? Let's try a different type of example. Okay, so in this example, we are going to find the first three terms. Okay, we don't know what they are. All we have is the function formula. Okay, and I also have the subscript version. Remember, these are pretty much the same formula, just one's in subscript form, one's in function form. Okay, so get used to seeing both, but they pretty much work the same way. I forgot to put this part of the subscript. We need to know the first term in the subscript, and it's still 40. Okay, so let's get into this. We're going to use the function formula first to find one of these terms, and then we'll use the subscript formula to find the next term. Okay, I just want to show you how to use both. All right, so first thing first, we know the formula looks like this. Okay, without doing any math, you should be able to tell me the first term, because without this first term, I can't find the second term. So if you look at your function formula, it's letting you know right now, my first term is 40. So I can automatically put 40 in there because it's my first term. And the reason I know that is because it was given to me here. They told me. Same thing with subscript. G sub 1 is the first term. Okay? So it's 40. I didn't have to do any math. I just had to know where to find it. Now, because I know the first term, I can now use the formula to find the second term. So let's use this formula to find the second term. Okay? So we want the second term. All right, so we're going to use G, and instead of N, we want the second term equal to function G, 2 minus 1 minus 8. Okay, so let's do this math. G parentheses 2 equals 2 minus 1 is 1 minus 8. Okay, again, this is not 1 minus 8. It's saying, hey, in order to complete this math, we need the first term in our function. So if you look, it's right here, 40, and we already put it in our sequence. So the first term in our function is going to be 40. Bring down the negative 8. Okay, and then we now can do the math simply. First term minus 8, that is 32. So that means the second term in my G sequence, or my G function, is 32. All right, let's go ahead and now let's try to use the subscript notation. It's the same idea, and we're going to find the third term in our sequence. Okay, so subscript version, we're going to go G subscript. Who are we trying to find? We're trying to find the third term equals G subscript 3 minus 1. Again, I'm just plugging in 3 for n. And then we got whatever that is, we're going to subtract 8 from it. Okay? So, we're finding the third term in our sequence. Let's do this math. 3 minus 1. So the third term in our sequence is equal to the second term in our sequence minus 8. Okay? So all this means is, in order to fill this in, I just need the second term in my sequence, which is 32. So G sub 2 turns into the second term, which is 32. Bring down the 8. And this should give me the third term in my sequence. And if we do this correctly, G sub 3 is equal to 24. So the third term in my sequence is 24. Okay? Again, this is how the recursive formula works. Hopefully this clarifies, like, why do we even write this down this way when we did it last week? Okay. So as of now, hopefully you know how to write these. We're going to get a little bit practice in right now. And then also, hopefully you know how to use them to find different terms in your sequence. Okay? All right. Let me pause real quick my share because I need to share a different screen. Number 6. We want to figure out what are the next 3 terms in our sequence. So in order to do that, we first must find out, what do I add or subtract to get to the next term, or what do I multiply or divide to get to the next term? So your question is, am I adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing to get to the next number, okay? And hopefully this looks pretty obvious. I know we have decimals and stuff, so this can be a little tricky, but I'm going to show you a quick trick on how to figure out how to find what we're adding or subtracting to get to the next, or how to find out if we're multiplying or dividing to get to the next, okay? So that's our question there. So here's the thing. We first want to test. Are we adding or subtracting to get to the next sequence, okay? So the first test we do there is you're going to take the second term and subtract the first term, okay? This was also in the notes from Tuesday. So to find how we're changing from one number to the next, I'm going to take the second term minus first term. Okay? I'm not saying that we're adding or subtracting, but this is a way to check if we're adding or subtracting. So the second term is 16.25 minus, and then we go 20.75. Okay, so this is for addition and subtraction. Again, I'm going to use my calculator. Okay, even though I know the answer, I'm going to give you time to get your calculators out. But we're simply going to go 16.25 minus 20.75. Okay, and what we get is negative 4.5. Okay, so this could be a possibility. So what it's saying is, I'm possibly, if adding and subtracting is the way to go, we are subtracting 4.75 every time. Sorry, 4.5 every time. Okay, so we would then test that. But before we go on any further, if it's not adding or subtracting, there's a way to figure out if it's multiplying or dividing, to see what you're going to be multiplying or dividing by. So this is called the common multiple. There's a formula for this guy. So to figure out if it's adding or subtracting, you do this and then you test it. Test if it works, okay? To check if it's multiplying or dividing, let's say this guy didn't work and we want to see what we're multiplying or dividing by. It's very similar. We're going to do this. Let me erase this for some room. Okay, it's second term divided by first term. This tests multiplication or division. Okay, so let's try this one. So the second term is 16.25 divided by 20.75. And if it's multiplication to get to the next term, let's divide this with our calculator. 16.25 divided by 20.75. We get this number. Okay, I'll leave it in decimal form. Okay, What this number tells us is this is what I should be multiplying. So I should be multiplying 0.7831 to get to the next term. And then you would test this guy out to see if it works. So real quick, just to show you how this works, I'm going to take 20.75 and multiply it by this. Okay, and what you'll notice is you get 16.25. It works for that one. But then we got to check it for the next one. 60.25 times 0.7831. And if you do that, what you actually get is not 11.75, you get 12.72, which tells me this is not the correct thing. We are not multiplying or dividing. So that means this was bad. Okay? So the reason I showed you that is because I want to make sure you understand how to find both ways. Okay? Because the problems we've been doing so far, you can easily see that, oh, I'm multiplying by 2. Okay? But you're going to have problems where you have decimals and you're going to have to do one of these to figure out how it go from the next. Okay? So we tested this guy. The common multiple doesn't work. So we haven't tested this guy. So let's test this guy's the common difference. Okay? That's from Tuesday's vocabulary, common difference. So we're going to test, if I subtract 4.5, does it give me the next term? So 20.75 minus 4.5, it gives me that one. We're good there. We got to test it here. It works here. And guess what? It also works here. So we have found how to get from one term to the next. We are subtracting 4.5. Okay? And this is basically the two ways you want to figure that out. If it's adding or subtracting, here's your formula to figure it out. If you think it's multiplying or dividing, here's your formula to figure it out. Test them. It should work for all of them. Okay? So now that we know how we're changing from one to the next, let's find our next three terms. So I'm going to go 7.25 minus 4.5. And my next term I should get is 2.75. Okay, and after that, let's just do it again. Minus 4.5. That's going to give me negative 1.75. It's okay to have negatives. Minus 4.5. And if you have a calculator, this is so much easier. And this is negative 6.25. So those are the part A. These are the three terms of my sequence. The hardest part was just trying to figure out how do I get from one term to the next. Okay? Here's a really fast way to do that. These two versions here. You just got to figure out which one's going to work. Okay? All right. So your quiz today is very similar to part B. What is the recursive formula for this sequence? Okay? So if you remember from Tuesday, we have the function form. So be comfortable with both. And then we're going to do the subscript. Okay, so we're going to write these formulas. Okay, I'm going to call this sequence function F. So we're going to use the letter F. So function F, parentheses, we're using the variable n again, equals, again, when you write these recursive formulas, you always just start off this way. Every recursive formula starts off this way. Okay? If we're doing subscript, it's just F little n at the bottom equals F little n minus 1 at the bottom. Okay? The only thing we have to do now is we have to tell how do we go from one term to the next? So we just found out it's subtracting 4.5. So guess what we're going to do the formula? We are going to subtract 4.5. Same thing for subscript form. We just subtract how the formula changes or how the sequence changes, 4.5. And then the last part of the formula that we talked about earlier today, you got to tell me which one's your starting term. So my starting term is the function f. We want the first term. That's why we put 1 there. Equals, and then what's your first term? It's 20.75. Same thing for the subscript formula. Our first term in f is 1, and it's 20.75. So again, these are two different formulas, but they mean exactly the same thing. So on your quiz today, you're going to be asked to write one or the other. Okay? But keep in mind, it is multiple choice. All right? So this is the recursive formula for this sequence. The stuff in red is how you always start the formula. Okay? The only thing that might change is the letters. Instead of F, it might be B or G. Instead of N, they might have X. Okay? So the only thing is different is the letters you are using, but it always starts like this. The only thing you have to put in is how do I go from one term to the next. And that goes here. If you're subtracting, subtract it. If it's a multiplication, you would put multiply and then whatever number you're multiplying by. Okay? Let's move on to C. We know from Tuesday, if you were absent Tuesday or forgot, look at the Zoom. To tell if it's geometric or arithmetic, it's very simple. Geometric, you are multiplying to get to the next term. Okay? Arithmetic, you are adding or subtracting to get to the next term. So based on what we're doing, we are actually subtracting to get to the next term. That tells me this is going to be arithmetic. Okay? So I have an arithmetic sequence. And how do I know? Because I have what is called a common difference. That's a fancy way of saying I'm adding or subtracting to get to the next guy. I have a common difference of negative 4.5. Okay, again, this common difference was explained on Tuesday's Zoom class. Hopefully you remember that. Okay, when you're multiplying to get to the next term, like if we had to do a multiplication one, instead of common difference, we called it common multiplier or common ratio. Check out the Zoom from Tuesday to check out those vocabulary words that are going to keep coming up, okay? So that's an arithmetic sequence. And then the last thing is describe what the graph will look like using complete sentences. Well, since it's arithmetic, from Tuesday I had explained that arithmetic sequences always make a line graph. So I'm going to just sketch this graph real quick. It's not accurate. So if we had to graph this sequence, we know it's a line graph because it's arithmetic. And we know it starts high and it's reducing. So that means it's decreasing from left to right. So it's going to look like this. Okay, it's a line graph that's going down from left to right. All right, so that means we would describe it in a complete sense. We have a line graph or linear graph decreasing because it's going down, and it's going down in a line. So when it goes down in a line, we use the word constantly. Okay? I also mentioned that we use the vocabulary word rate of change. Okay, so the rate of change for this would be decreasing. Okay, and more specifically, what is it decreasing by? Basically, what are you subtracting by? Decreasing by. Okay, so you'll see that in there on some of your tests and stuff like that. So that's pretty much how you do number 6. Remember, this is basically what you're going to be tested on today. Can you write formulas? Okay, if you've been watching the videos and doing the work and then checking your answers, you should be fairly good with this already. Okay, if you haven't, this quiz might be a little difficult for you. All right. Okay, guys, I want to give you enough time for the quiz. So I'm going to give you the quiz. It's 3 problems. Just have to show me the answer. Don't have to copy down the problems. Okay, show me the answer. It's multiple choice. Just make sure you number them so I can know what I'm grading. And then finish the quiz. I'll give you the code to check in. Make sure you check in today. It's worth points, and it's also your attendance. And lastly, start working on some of the calendar stuff, especially stuff that should have been turned in a long time ago. Please start submitting that. Okay, progress reports are coming out soon. When you're done with the quiz and you're done checking in, you are dismissed to go work on the calendar. All right, so here we go. Here is your Zoom quiz for today. There's 3 problems, and your check-in code is coffee. Good luck.